already feel it, not as a guess, not as wishful thinking, but as something quiet and certain living just beneath the surface of your everyday life. There is someone. And even though he has said nothing, even though his silence stretches across days and maybe weeks, something in you keeps returning to the same thought. He is thinking about you. You feel it the way you feel a change in weather before it arrives. And you are not wrong. This is not your imagination reaching for something that isn't there. Psychology has studied the strange and deeply human experience of emotional attunement, the way two people can remain profoundly connected across distance and silence without a single word being exchanged. What you are sensing has a name. What you are experiencing has an explanation. And the confusion you feel, that tender or aching mix of knowing and not knowing, is one of the most emotionally exhausting places a person can occupy. You deserve to understand what is actually happening inside him. Not so you can fix it, not so you can change it, but because understanding brings peace, and you deserve peace. So let's go there together. Let's go inside the silence, because his silence is not empty, it is full. The first thing happening inside him is what psychology calls a thought loop, and it is something he almost certainly cannot control. A thought loop forms when a person, an experience, or a feeling becomes deeply encoded in someone's emotional memory. It is not something he chose. It is not something he can simply switch off the way you turn off a light, or when you have occupied a significant space in someone's inner world, whether through shared history, deep conversation, a moment of real vulnerability, or simply the particular way you made him feel seen. Your presence becomes woven into the architecture of his mind. Neuroscientists describe this as the brain's default mode network, activating around emotionally significant people. In plain language, it means that in his quietest moments, when he is driving, when he wakes in the early morning, when there is a pause in the noise of his day, his mind travels back to you, automatically, without his permission. He does not decide to think about you every single day. He simply finds you there, already waiting in the space between everything else. And that is not small. That is, in fact, one of the most honest things a human being can experience, because the mind does not cycle obsessively around people who do not matter. The second thing happening inside him is something far more tender and far more complicated. And it is this: he is afraid, not of you, but of what you represent to him. When a man thinks about a woman every single day and still says nothing, there is almost always a war happening inside him between what he feels and what he believes he is allowed to feel. Men are taught quietly, persistently from a very young age that emotional vulnerability is a form of weakness, that reaching towards someone, expressing longing, admitting that another person holds space in your heart is something to be managed, suppressed, or at the very least delayed until certainty is guaranteed. And certainty, when it comes to matters of the heart, almost never arrives. So he waits. He thinks about you and waits for a version of himself that feels ready. He rehearses words he never sends. He reaches for his phone and puts it back down. This is not indifference dressed up as silence. This is the particular paralysis that comes from caring too much and trusting himself too little. His silence is not a verdict on your worth. It is a reflection of his own unresolved interior. And those are two entirely different things. The third thing happening inside him is something that might surprise you. He is grieving. Not a loss that has been confirmed, but a loss he is afraid is coming. The specific grief of something precious that has not yet been claimed. Psychology refers to this as anticipatory loss, and it is one of the most quietly agonizing emotional states a person can inhabit. He is not indifferent to the possibility of losing you. He is, in fact, deeply aware of it. Every day that he thinks about you and says nothing, some part of him understands that silence has its own cost, that time does not pause and wait for courage to catch up. He may be watching from the edges of your life, aware of you in ways you cannot fully see, carrying a kind of quiet longing that has no outlet because he has not yet built the bridge between what he feels and what he is willing to risk. There is something almost sacred in that kind of longing, a love that has not yet found its voice, hovering just at the edge of becoming real. Whether it ever crosses that edge is something only he can decide, but it is not nothing, where what he carries in his silence is not nothing. The fourth thing happening inside him is a question he keeps asking himself. And the question is about you, but it is also entirely about him. The question is, does she still think of me? Does she know? Is there still a chance? Or have I already waited too long? This is the quiet torment of a person who wants, but doubts his own worthiness of being wanted in return. He wonders if the window is still open. He wonders if you have moved forward. He wonders if reaching out now would feel like an intrusion into a life that has already rearranged itself around his absence. And the cruelty of this loop is that the longer he waits, the more convinced he becomes that it is too late, when in truth, the only thing making it feel too late is his own hesitation. He does not know what you know. He cannot feel what you feel. And so he sits with the question day after day, turning it over in his hands like something fragile he is afraid to set down and afraid to hold too tightly. Now let's talk about you, because through all of this, through his silence, through the waiting, through the strange ache of knowing without being told, you have continued to show up in your own life with a kind of grace that deserves to be acknowledged. You have not demanded, you have not chased, you have sat with something deeply uncertain, and you have not let it break you, even on the days when it nearly did. You deserve to be chosen, not considered, not kept in the background as a possibility while someone decides whether the timing is right, not held at a careful distance because someone else has not yet done the work of becoming brave. You deserve to be chosen, clearly, intentionally, out loud, by someone who understands that your presence in their life is not a given, but a gift. Your feelings are not too much. The depth with which you sense things, the way you notice what others overlook, the emotional intelligence it takes to read silence the way you read it. These are not flaws. They are not evidence that you feel too deeply or want too much. They are the precise qualities that make you the kind of person worth thinking about every single day. The world will sometimes tell you to feel less. Do not listen. Your capacity to feel is not a burden. It is your most honest form of wisdom, and your silence, the restraint you have practiced, the dignity with which you have held your own feelings without forcing his hand, is not cowardice. It is not weakness dressed up as patience. It is a form of self-protection that comes from a deep and quiet understanding of your own worth. You did not beg. You did not diminish yourself. You waited with integrity, and that is something to be honored, not apologized for. Whatever comes next, whether he finds his voice or whether life calls you toward someone who already has, you carry something rare. The ability to love quietly and deeply, to feel without losing yourself, to know without needing to be told. That is not a wound, that is a gift. If today's reflection touched something real in you, you are not alone in what you feel. This is what psychology wisdom is here for, to sit with you in the questions that don't have easy answers, and to remind you that what you feel is real, it is valid, and it matters. See, subscribe to Psychology Wisdom so you never have to navigate these feelings alone. And if this video spoke to you, please give it a like. It helps us reach others who are quietly feeling the same thing and searching for the same understanding. You found this video for a reason. We are glad you're here.